When a wealthy politician tries to buy out a stubborn farmer, he expects an easy deal, until the farmer gives him a response he'll never forget. The sun hung low over the quiet farmland, casting golden light over endless rows of crops. Thomas Carter wiped the sweat from his brow, leaning against his rusted old truck. His family had owned this land for generations, and despite offers from corporations and developers, he had never once considered selling. This land was more than soil. It was history, sacrifice, and legacy. That's why he wasn't surprised when the black luxury car rolled up his dirt driveway, dust swirling around it. He had been expecting this visit. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the uneven ground. He looked around with mild disgust before approaching. "Mr. Carter," he said smoothly, offering a hand. "My name is Daniel Hayes. I represent Senator Bradley Thomas." Didn't shake his hand. Instead, he pulled a worn handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his hands clean, eyes steady. "I know who you are." Hayes smiled, unfazed. "Good. Then you know why I'm here." Thomas didn't respond, so Hayes continued. "The senator has taken a great interest in this area. He believes in progress, Mr. Carter. A new development here would bring jobs, infrastructure, prosperity." Thomas let out a dry chuckle. "Prosperity for who?" Hayes's smile tightened. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a thick envelope. "The senator understands sentimentality. That's why he's making a generous offer. $2 million. Cash, no questions. Just sign the papers." Thomas stared at the envelope. He could feel the weight of his father's and grandfather's hard work pressing down on him. Money like that could change his life. But at what cost? He stepped forward, closer than Hayes expected. "Tell me something, Mr. Hayes. What's this land really worth to you?" Hayes hesitated. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if you're offering me $2 million, how much are you really making off of it?" The politician's assistant shifted uncomfortably, but Hayes recovered quickly. "That's not important. What matters is that this deal benefits everyone." Thomas gave a slow nod. Then, without warning, he took the envelope and right in front of Hayes, ripped it in half. The crisp bills inside scattered, caught in the wind like autumn leaves. Hayes's expression darkened. "That was a mistake." Thomas tilted his hat back, meeting his gaze without fear. "Number." "The mistake was thinking I'd sell my family's legacy for pocket change." Hayes took a step closer, voice lower now. "You don't understand who you're dealing with." Thomas smiled. "Neither do you." And with that, he turned and walked back toward his house, leaving the stunned politician standing in a field where no price tag could ever buy loyalty. Hayes stood frozen, his expensive shoes now coated in dust, his face a mask of barely contained frustration. He wasn't used to hearing no, especially not from a simple farmer. With a forced smile, he adjusted his tie. "Mr. Carter, I suggest you reconsider. This isn't just about money, it's about influence. The senator has powerful friends, people who don't like obstacles." Thomas turned back slowly, his expression unreadable. "That's supposed to scare me?" Hayes sighed, dropping his polished act. "Listen, old man, you think this land is yours? You think a signature is the only thing standing between you and progress?" He took a step closer. "This deal will happen, whether you like it or not." Thomas didn't blink. Instead, he leaned in, voice steady. "That a threat?" Hayes smiled again, but this time there was no charm. "I don't make threats. I state facts." Thomas nodded slowly, then, without warning, he whistled. From the barn, the heavy sound of boots on dirt echoed as a group of men stepped into the open. They weren't just farmhands. They were built like men who had seen real fights, their eyes sharp, their postures firm. Some carried tools, others just stood there, waiting, watching. Hayes's confidence faltered. Thomas crossed his arms. "See, you're not the first smooth-talking suit to step foot on my land thinking they could push me around. But I don't scare easy, and I sure as hell don't stand alone." Hayes cleared his throat, glancing at his assistant, who looked just as uneasy. "There's no need for hostility, Mr. Carter." Thomas smirked. "That's funny, because it sounded a lot like you were telling me I had no choice." For the first time, Hayes took a step back. The air between them was heavy, filled with an unspoken warning. "This isn't over," Hayes finally muttered. Thomas gave him a slow, knowing nod. "No, Mr. Hayes, I don't reckon it is." Without another word, Hayes turned and walked back to his car. As the luxury vehicle disappeared down the dirt road, Thomas watched it go, his expression unchanged. He knew men like Hayes. They didn't take no for an answer, and they always came back. But Thomas Carter wasn't a man who backed down, and the next time Hayes showed up, he'd be ready. The following days were eerily quiet, too quiet. Thomas knew men like Hayes didn't just walk away. They regrouped, planned, came back with a different angle, one that didn't involve negotiations. And sure enough, trouble arrived 3 nights later. It started with a fire. Thomas woke to the sharp scent of smoke. He bolted upright, his instincts kicking in before his mind could fully process the danger. The glow outside his window wasn't from the moon. It was from his barn, engulfed in roaring flames. "Damn it!" He grabbed his shotgun from beside the door and rushed outside. His farm hands were already there, working fast to contain the blaze. Someone had set this. It wasn't an accident. The barn had been fine when he locked up that night. A figure stood at the edge of the property, just beyond the fire's glow, watching. Thomas tightened his grip on the shotgun and marched toward them. The closer he got, the clearer the smirk on the man's face became. He wasn't hiding. He wanted Thomas to see him. Hayes, or rather, the type of man Hayes hired when his polite offers didn't work. "You should have taken the money," the man said, voice calm, almost amused. "Things didn't have to get messy." Thomas stopped a few feet away, his face unreadable. "Messy?" He glanced at the flames, then back at the man. "This ain't messy, just desperate." The man chuckled, stepping forward slightly. "The senator's done being nice. You sign the papers, and this all stops. No more fires, no more accidents. You keep pushing back, though?" He clicked his tongue. "Things get worse." Thomas nodded slowly. "I see." Then, with the kind of speed no one expected from a man his age, he raised the shotgun and fired. Not at the man, but at the ground inches from his feet. The blast echoed through the night, sending dirt flying. The man stumbled back, startled, his smirk gone. Thomas lowered the gun just enough to show he wasn't bluffing. "Next time," he said evenly, "I won't miss." The man stared at him for a long moment before giving a slow, knowing grin. "You just made a real bad enemy, old man." Thomas didn't blink. "Number, you just made a real bad mistake." Without another word, the man turned and disappeared into the darkness. Thomas watched him go, heart pounding. This wasn't over. It was just getting started. And if Hayes thought he could break him, he was about to learn a hard lesson. Some men don't scare. Some men fight. The attack on his barn was just the beginning. Over the next few days, Thomas noticed strange things. His water supply contaminated, tire tracks near his fence line, phone calls with no voice on the other end. Hayes wasn't just sending a message. He was applying pressure, waiting for Thomas to crack. But Thomas Carter didn't break. Late one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he sat on his porch, shotgun across his lap, waiting. He knew they'd come again. Men like Hayes didn't stop until they got what they wanted, or until they were given a reason to stop. Right on cue, the low hum of engines rumbled in the distance. Headlights appeared, creeping down his long dirt road. Not just one car this time. 3. Thomas stood, stretching his shoulders like he was about to do a day's work. Inside the house, his farmhands, men loyal to him, men who had seen real fights before, were waiting in the shadows, silent and ready. The cars rolled to a stop. Doors opened. 5 men stepped out, dressed in dark suits that didn't belong anywhere near a farm. And then, last to emerge, was Daniel Hayes himself. His expression was calm, but his eyes held something colder. He adjusted his cufflinks, stepping forward as if he were still in control. "Mr. Carter," he greeted smoothly. I hoped you'd be more reasonable by now. Thomas didn't move. And I hoped you'd be smarter. Hayes smirked. You're standing alone with a shotgun against 5 men. And you think I'm the one lacking intelligence? Thomas let out a low chuckle. Who said I was alone? Before Hayes could process it, a single gunshot split the silence, not from Thomas, but from the tree line behind the cars. A bullet buried itself in the dirt near Hayes's feet. His men stiffened, reaching for weapons, but the sound of more cocking rifles echoed from the darkness. Then, from the shadows, Thomas's men stepped into view, each armed and calm. The numbers had shifted. Hayes's smirk wavered. You think you can scare me? Thomas took a step forward. Number, I think I can make you understand something real clear. This land ain't for sale. It never was. He let the words sink in, his voice steady. Now you can turn around and walk away, or we can see just how influential you really are when no one's around to clean up your mess. A tense silence stretched between them. Then slowly Hayes exhaled and smoothed his tie. He glanced around, calculating. Finally, he gave a forced smile. Well, Mr. Carter, you've made yourself clear. He turned to his men. Let's go. One by one, they got back in their cars. As the engines roared to life, Hayes rolled down his window, eyes locking onto Thomas one last time. You might have won today, he said, voice even. But men like me, we never really lose. Thomas didn't flinch. That's so? He tipped his hat. Well, men like me, we don't forget. With that, the cars pulled away, kicking up dust as they disappeared into the night. Thomas watched them go, then turned back to his land, his legacy. He knew Hayes wouldn't come back, not after tonight, not after learning that some things, some people, simply couldn't be bought. The fight was over. The land was safe, and Thomas Carter remained exactly what he had always been, unchangeable.